How cold is it?
It's cold. We're in the peak of winter, so yes, definitely cold. But AI is still pretty hot, so that's keeping me warm. It's a bit corny, but yes.
That's good.
Look, I think it'd be great to talk. There was an interesting article by Ark. Ark Invest had a bit of a report around generative AI. But why don't we kick off with Figma? I know that you've got a bit to do with what's been happening there, and we have some conversations later today around probably some of that. But why don't you outline a bit of what Figma are doing? What's their approach? How that's going to impact development or prototyping? Yeah. Why don't you run us through what was announced this week? Because they had a conference, didn't they?
So Figma they have a yearly developer conference, and last year they were supposed to be bought by Adobe, or maybe for 2 years ago already or something. Long story short, that thing got scuttled by regulatory pressure, concerns that Adobe become this monopoly over design tools globally. So we had a lot of fanfare from all the clever investors of Figma when they were very happy that Adobe is going to give them a massive exit. It's been very quiet since then. I think it looks like a Figma either needs to be bought by a competitor of Adobe, or better, become an independent giant, and which I would love to see. That's the best exit. The best exit is to become the next tech titan. Anyway, so Figma year on is empowering, is now kind of integrating AI into their product suite much more deeply, and it's really interesting to see the demo. Have you seen the demo?
I have seen the demo. Yeah, interesting how it'll automate and make that creative process a lot quicker and generate your prototype really quickly.
It makes you wonder, right? So I don't know what percentage, but a significant percentage of some of design work is going into, for example, they demonstrate websites and like pricing screens on SaaS websites. If a significant proportion of design work is going into from scratch building the landing page for websites and pricing pages for website, and now a single prompt gives you a very good quality design screen that is responsive and so forth. How do we feel about it? Do we feel like, oh my God, they're taking our job? Or do we feel like, oh great, now we don't have to do this nonsense repetitive job that has been done more than a million times before? I'm on the camp of the latter. It can make your product better, it can put money and time into the design features that matter as opposed to the things that don't matter. They show a really, really nice integration with the tool itself. So you don't have to go to a text chat box and says, give me a screen. You are inside Figma and it's integrated into your workflow, which in this little podcast or our little show, we've been talking a lot about how integration is kind of vertically. We're going to look at a lot of vertical AI integrations into niches as opposed to taking that. I'm not saying it's the destination. I'm saying it's this tension. I think this evolution, this technological development is characterized by this tension between throwing you out of your current tool into a new tool that's better and smarter and so forth, versus making your current tool more intelligent. So I think that Figma is taking the step of integrating your current tool. Now it's really interesting because the latter is powering the incumbent, whereas throwing you out of the tool into a new tool and so forth is a move that challengers will take. So I think seeing what Figma, everybody was anticipating, what is Figma going to do? And I think they've done a phenomenal job in integrating the AI into their core product. And I don't have an opinion other than well done in terms of technology. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. What do you think?
Yeah. Look, I think it's good, and it's interesting to see Figma, who were really a smarter, I'm not going to say smarter, but a collaborative way of doing what Adobe should have done in the first place. That's why Adobe wanted to buy Figma. So they did a better job of what Adobe were doing, because Adobe was the incumbent, is the incumbent. And so obviously that didn't go ahead. Adobe have put all these AI features into their product, which I think some of them are pretty good. So it's good to see how Figma has evolved. I think what I'm seeing, to your point around, is this going to take away those designer jobs? I think people that use these tools effectively, and if you know how to talk to the tool, you're going to be able to be far more productive than people. Like I think this is what it is. If you know how to talk, to any of the LLMs, for example, or you know how to use Figma using the AI, you'll be really productive and you'll be able to generate so much more. So a good designer using these tools is going to be way more productive than designers that don't. And so I think it's going to mean you have to know how to use this, have this additional skills. And I think this is what I'm seeing more and more of just in general is there's a gap of skills. Like we're in some weird bubble. We're in like an AI bubble that we sit and talk about all this stuff. I figure most people know how to do a lot of these things. But what I realize is there's a lot of population that don't are not even looking at this, don't aren't able to use it. So I think we're going to have two classes of the economy: the people that are using this to enhance their jobs and be more productive and take on more clients and do more things that way, and the people that aren't. So I think it's great. You know, we have an investment. You're on the board of that company, Buzzy, and Buzzy does use Figma, and Buzzy uses that to be able to generate applications, working applications. I think the one thing is clear: software developments is being disrupted. And so whether you use for code generation or for developing a app with that no code, that's where we're headed. And you know, if you look at, you know, we talk just once again, we look at the stuff coming out of Claude and Anthropic and the artifacts that are coming out and how you can generate some pretty cool stuff. It's it's mind blowing. I think where we're going, but it's definitely what the future of software development is different than what it has been in the past. And so it's going to be disruptive for a lot of software developers. Let's move on. I'd love to maybe talk a little bit about a report that Ark Invest had that, you know, covers particular topics. They obviously love AI, but they really went deeper into generative AI and how this is a new consumer operating system. And you know, so they started to talk a little bit about some of the things we've been talking about in terms of AI agents and embedding them into the operating system, and went through a little bit of a thing around adoption cycles and going, well, where are we with AI compared to some of the other technologies? And I thought it was quite interesting to see, you know, how quickly, if we look at, you know, the telephone took quite a bit of time over time for adoption, but some of these other technologies, whether it be smartphones and how AI is even quicker. And, you know, there's relatively quite a lot of reports I'm seeing now where people are saying they're now admitting to using AI in their workplace, and so we're seeing this adoption is rapid for a lot of people, and so you know, they're also sort of going, this AI enabled hardware is really, you know, getting penetration in pretty quick time. So I think they're sort of saying within 4 years in the US this is going to be sort of a big thing there. Some of the other things they talked about was really these AI agents, and we've talked a lot about that, and I 100% agree. And we, you know, this sort of agents going to be doing these complex tasks for us, and this is really where, you know, where we're going. We've seen a few of the early stage companies here as well as overseas in terms of, you know, what people are doing that. But you know, once again, starting to look at what does this mean from a spend, from an investment point of view. But you're seeing that their predictions are this is going to grow pretty rapidly around, you know, AI facilitated spending. And so I find this really interesting to go, we're going to have these helpers to go and do these things. And the other big discussion that I thought was quite interesting was around you know, search and how we go along and how this is going to disrupt search. And I know we've talked about that before, but really talking about how is this going to work? You know, we kind of right now we do a search, it goes to a search engine, and then it goes to a marketplace, and then you check out in that conversion. So, you know, this is going to change, you know, quite a bit as we go forward, that we're really going to probably have more of a prompt. We're going to talk to an AI agent, whether it be text, voice, or a command, you'll be able to do that. And then I think the interesting thing is that agent could go out to multiple search engines, and then we have another sort of curation of that, and then you can, you know, go and choose the thing that you want. And I think this is very different to the way we've been working, where, you know, Google controlled one part of that. We're now going to open this up to lots of different other ways of advertising, and so I think this is going to change a lot of what happens in the future. It's not to say Google won't be part of that. You can see that but it will be different. And then, you know, the question is, do the big platforms, are they going to be the ones that control that and still win? So whether it be Meta and you know, Google and Apple and all of the guys that the usual players. But I think it's going to be really interesting. So look, I think there'll be different ways of advertising. This is what I think is going to be really disruptive from the point of view of most businesses. Now, I've seen a couple of, and in fact, one of our startups were impacted by the way Google search is now working, and they've changed their algorithms. Now, I think if we think there are businesses out there right now that are dependent on Google for getting traffic for an e-commerce site, this is going to change that. And so I think it's a bit of a risk for some companies right now that this is going to change the whole way they work, and they're going to have to adapt. But it's also an opportunity for new people to be able to be found, and people to be able to advertise in a different way. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in coming years. But I think if you're an existing business, you need to be worried if you're really dependent on that traffic from Google, that's not going to be there all the time. And so there has to be a new way. You need to be thinking about what are the future things that are going to impact me in this AI space and AI search and advertising. So yeah, look, I think there's going to be different value. That's what they talked about in the value chain of that. And as I mentioned, around the walled sort of gardens in there. But that's where the opportunity comes in for those, those new players. And so I think this is what's going to be really interesting. Look, they talked about a few other things around, that sort of AI intermediation and execution, and how that revenue is going to change over the coming years. But you can see, and look, Ark are very bullish around technology. If you look at some of their predictions, they've been very bullish about some other things. I think even if we take this with a grain of salt, it still is showing there's going to be a really big growth in these areas.
So all I want to say is that this is, numbers like 800 billion total intermediation revenue and all that stuff, that's pure fiction. As always, I have not seen yet. I've seen reports always forecasting $1 billion into the future, but never counting and says, hey, X years ago we forecasted, so much. This is where we're standing compared to our forecast. So no one really validates those claims, and they're pretty much kind of back of an envelope or napkin calculations. I tell you this: it's very clear that if every time you press enter on a LLM, that costs you incremental money as opposed to something that's going to be dirt cheap, like serving a web page, the entire business model of the web is going away. So we're moving from our advertising supported free services to something else. So people now pay for their agents, pay for their think about the things you pay for. You pay for cloud storage. You pay for you typically pay for AI agents these days and software. So I think if unless they're going to come up with systems that can do the AI in like a fraction, literally single-digit fraction of the cost they do it today, which may happen, then the advertising-based model of the internet is toast. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, first of all, it became creepy. Second, these systems are better than just advertising things at you. So yeah, we did talk about it a lot, that the entire model is about to change. If your agent is intelligent, the advertising is way more accurate. It has context. You know exactly what you need when you need it, as opposed to here's 10,000 options based on your browsing history for the last X months. It's good to see Ark Invest listening to our podcast and copying our ideas. I'm very flattered by that. Well done.
Just quickly, there's a couple other things that talked about voice and how that's going to generative AI is going to likely realize the full potential of this being able to talk, and we're seeing that more and more with OpenAI or Claude and all these things, being able to talk to the models and be able to interact with them in a new way. And so we're going to use our cameras, or we're going to have a new device that will allow us to interact. And so I think the whole thing was really, just interesting to see, some of the things we're discussing, research around this, and how the interfaces are really going to change. And so I recommend, if you're interested in this, go and have a quick look at that. Look at how, things change over time. And I think if we look backwards, we can start to see historically, where we might go with this. And that's what, to me, is really becoming exciting. And there's still a lot to work out, but we're in the middle of something that is really significant. So I think the interesting thing for me with all of this is the pace at which this is happening. So everything seems to happen a lot quicker. But I think some of the adoption, so I think people in the corporate space are still holding off a bit. So I think people are thinking about this, but people aren't necessarily doing this. And I think this next few years is going to be this big change of where people start to adopt, take on these experiments, start to understand a bit more of these implications. And some really great companies are going to come out of that. Now the big thing is it the incumbents that'll get that value, or is it some of the newer companies? And I think that's what we're backing, that there will be a portion of those earlier stage companies that are going to get those benefits. But we need to be looking at these new models of working, and that's what we sort of start to kind of look at some of the things of what what they're talking about. But look, I definitely recommend it's worth having a look at, and to really start to think about where we're going in each of these areas. So the key thing for me out of the report was really around the agents, around the advertising, and around that hardware adoption is really taking off. So there was an article in the Canberra Times actually yesterday just around that AI, we hear all these negative things around AI, but there was an article in the Canberra Times talking about AI actually creating jobs, and that we need to, create another 200,000 roles in Australia by 2030. And so, I think this is going to be quite an interesting, way. That there's often you hear the negative, but it's good to hear that that we're going to need a lot more jobs. Particularly in the engineering, data science, cybersecurity, and all of those sorts of industries. But equally talking about AI-related jobs in finance, marketing, and legal. And so, once again, I think there's this gap of skills, and we're learning all the time, and these are new jobs that we're learning about, and working with companies. So I think the one thing I can see is we need to fill this gap of how do we take people along a journey using this technology to change the way they learn, to change the way they work. And so, some of those things are coming up, as well as some of the frameworks around policy and, what the impacts are. But, hopefully there's some initiatives that'll encourage people to really learn about this. So, yeah, this was really around the Tech Council talked about, about the fact that this was going to happen, which I think is interesting. Sequoia recently had an article talking about AI's $600 billion question. And so what they did is they raised a point around, is this AI bubble? They talked about this actually a little while ago in September. They talked about AI's $200 billion question. That's now a $600 billion question. And so what they're sort of talking about is where's all the revenue, the gap between valuations and the revenue coming from. And so, they really discussed around, this is where it was before. They said it was a $200 billion, kind of AI revenue required for payback. And now that's up to 600. And so, yeah, look, I think this is really interesting around, are we in the middle of a bubble? Are we finding what's going to happen here? Because there's a lot of revenue that's got to come out of this. I'd love to hear. So, I can give you my thoughts. My thoughts are, I think there are some very massively overvalued companies that are there, and there are some things that are not going to be able to generate the revenue required to get payback. But I think within that, there are some great companies that are going to do that. And, our previous discussion around the report from Ark, those business models are going to provide some of those companies with great opportunities, I think, that are not necessarily the incumbents. And I think that's where those revenues will come from, because it's going to shift from traditional providers of some of these solutions and models to the new ones.
Well, what's the main claim? The main claim that we are in a bubble, or that the total invested into the sector is such that expect such and such revenue, and we don't see that? Is that the main claim?
Yeah, look, I think the thing is around how we've got to get a lot more revenue than what's coming out of it now. And I think with any new technology as well, or new ways, it takes some time for people to adopt it, for those business models to generate the right kind of revenue. And, right now, clearly, OpenAI and NVIDIA are the ones generating revenue out of in terms of large revenues out of that. But I think that there'll be winners and losers, which is one of the things that I was just sort of saying that they're talking about it in there. And then some of the things that are right now, they're talking about the hardware, that there has been a supply and demand issue that will also, the market will address those things as well. And so I think, I think there'll be some really interesting things. Some investments are going to go to nothing, and some are going to be really great investments. So I think it's just a really interesting time. And I think you have to be pretty deep into this to try and make sure you can take advantage of this. And I think that's why I'm really enjoying what we're seeing. I think, we're not always going to get it right, but I think we have a good chance as well of being in the middle of this, being able to make some good decisions. So I think that's I think that's the point, that it's there's a lot to go. There's a lot that needs to come from those revenues around AI, and there has been a bit of a bubble around that. And I would agree with that, but I also think the bubble, there's some truth in the opportunity in what's happening, and I think there's a big opportunity still, even though there are.
Historically, every time there's a new technology wave, there's a bubble around that goes into people believing that they can become the next biggest company, and that is the bubble, almost by definition. Besides crypto, which was still everybody's raising eyebrows, what the hell happened there? So the spend that's going on right now is, one way to think about it is just wasteful, and the other way to think about it is we're building the infrastructure of the future. And so the rational argument is that, well, they're basically all this money essentially goes and makes the future of AI, the future of compute, the future of the internet faster, better, and smarter. And that will enable the next 100 years of prosperity or so forth. So that's kind of the VC argument for excessive valuation. I don't expect all investments to return to do ROI. That's not the business of venture. So that argument, that article that you just shared, makes a lot of sense. And I'm not going to expect a lot of companies will go bust, and the whole game is to invest and to throw money into something you think can survive the bubble and will come out on the other side as the big winner. And basically that's the competitive nature of the system we live in and the economy. This is the economic system that we live in. So it's a common argument. It comes from all, from economists to VC. I heard a podcast by A16Z the other day by the founders, Andreessen and Horowitz, and they say exactly the same thing. They're basically countering the perception that there's a bubble and there's a splash and everything. Valuations are ridiculous, and it's the same thing every few years. You hear the same arguments. It was crypto before that, it was SaaS before that, it was mobile before that, it was social before that. It's always the same story. So the game of the game is to try to bet about the winning horse, and you don't know who's the win. You don't know the race really when you make the bet. So that's my 2 cents.
Let's finish off with just one last little bit of news around Australia. So look, there's an article in Smart Company this week just around some of the AI raises so far. Just some great founders, and in fact, we had our Dazed and Diffused, the guys from Spatial GPT were there. So I hadn't actually realised they've done a raise from Innovate GPT to raise some money around what they're doing in Spatial GPT, which we talked about last week. The being able to use the headsets to look at real estate. Vapar, 2 great founders, Amanda and Michelle. They raised some money. They're using some interesting technology. We looked at that a little while ago, and I wish we had been able to invest in them earlier on, a little bit past where we would ideally invest. But they're using AI to look at water pipes and be able to detect sort of sewage leaks and do all this in revolutionising that the way that works. And I think this is an example, of companies doing, things that aren't always, you wouldn't always think about using AI in to really to kind of solve just rudimentary problems that we have maintaining pipes, and to be able to do that more effectively. And they're doing well growing out from Australia, doing this in the UK and other places. But yeah, there's a few other companies. Brainfish raised about $3 million there. I hadn't talked to the guys around them, but also Andromeda, and so that was really interesting. I saw Grace present at one of our events with her robot, Abby, really using that robot to be able to, help with caring as the aging population happens, be an assistant, entertain, all these different things. And I was pleased to see that she was able to raise some money there, a $3 million round, which is great that she was able to do that. And same thing with some other companies, True State. But look, we're getting lots of companies in Australia raising money. There's plenty more. I think we're seeing some really healthy things happening here in terms of companies coming out, creating new products, and we've seen that this week as well. Having closed out some things ourselves, which we can talk about at another point. We're starting a tradition now, Draw. So the tradition is to end the show with using the LLM to help us to sort of end the show. So I'm going to let you do that today.
All right, so tell me what you think about this. And that's a wrap on This Week in AI. If you enjoyed the show, hit subscribe, leave us a review, and share with your fellow tech enthusiasts. Got questions or cool AI ideas? Connect with us on social media or via email. Join us next week for more AI insights and adventures. Stay curious, stay innovate, and keep those algorithms humming. Thanks for listening.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.